Korchnoi versus Karpov played at the candidates final in 1974, and the game 21 it was. Karpov won this match by 3-2, if I remember correctly, and thus gained the right to play Bobby Fischer 1 year later, which a match would never was to happen. Bishop e7. Karpov's last move. We have a normal Queen's Indian on the board, and white can play castles here, but Korchnoi played a more ambitious move, which is knight c3. A knight c3 in the Queen's Indian in this type of position is usually met by knight e4, trying to trade bishops, gain control over e4, etc. But Karpov instead played castles, and this is much sharper in fact, because this allows white to control the point e4 with queen c2. So now knight e4 is not possible anymore. And black has other options. Of course, he can play d5, for example, but this is a completely different type of game. Or in fact, after queen c2, black can play c5. c5 attacking the center in a different way. And of course, if black were allowed to trade on d4 and on this knight, the queen on c2 wouldn't be well placed. But white's idea when he plays queen c2 is to go d5, which is also always an idea to reckon with. If black has played the Queen's Indian, bishop on b7 and has played c5, then d5, if this works out for white, it's usually good for him. But chess is not that simple. d5. And the idea after captures is knight g5. And now we already see one idea of queen c2. This knight on g5 is targeting h7, and so this way this knight on f6 is tied down to the defense of h7. And black can now play h6 is a different way. Of course, h6 driving back the knight from g5. Immediately this is possible, and then white can play knight d5. It can play h4. But you see already here that the game has become very sharp after only 10 moves. Knight e5, and instead Karpov played knight c6, which is a very cool move. He just ignores the threat on d5. And now Korchnoi took on d5 with a knight. Again, all these arrows you've seen, white is threatening to take on f6 and to checkmate on h7 with a queen. It looks very dangerous for black, but in fact it's definitely playable. We just have to know some traps here. Knight e5. Okay, just wants to show this is not possible. And now Karpov played g6. And in fact, this is a opening position which has reoccurred after this game several times, and it seems that black is quite fine here. Okay, he has weakened his king side. He has a weak spot on d5, but playing all these moves, knight g5, knight e5, queen c2, white has also lost time, so the position is about balanced here, I guess. That's the theoretical verdict. Yeah, okay, g6. Let's say the first attacking wave, white's first attacking wave is over. What do you think? How did Korchnoi continue now, since this mate threat on h7 is out of the game? What did he do now to improve his position? What would he do with the white queen here? To Korchnoi's move. And in fact, this, as I said, this position has occurred several times in Grandmaster practice. And for example, if the game Belyevsky versus Bernicassia played 7 years ago in Reykjavik 2015, and Buck then played bishop a6, b3, and all this stuff. And it seems that after, what's a wide variation, but today the computer just says it's equal. So, okay, modern chess theory. But we have the year 1974, and not all of this was known at the time. After queen d2, Karpov took on d5. If sometimes c takes d5 can be a very strong move, getting the pawn, hitting the knight, and planning d6, stuff like that. But here this runs into knight to d4, and it's very possible that black takes over the initiative in this position, knight d4. So Korchnoi took on d5 with the bishop, which also, white's pieces are very active, of course. Queen, knight, bishop, all that stuff. But black is fully developed. And here Black Karpov he made a mistake. He played rook b8. He should have just taken white's knight off. Takes. And maybe this position is a shade better for white bishops. But otherwise, black is fine. He's well developed. He can, after protecting his bishop on b7, you trade queen c and then play rook b8, say, something like that. Takes state. And a new place. Something like that, and you're planning this, getting white's light squared bishop off and c3. Black is okay here, I think. Okay, rook b8 is what Karpov played, and it is amazing that a player of Karpov's caliber makes a mistake like rook b8, but this was often Karpov's problem when matches took longer. That this is game 21, so quite long, 5 bonds in the match. And I think he was just tired. 13. Can only be explained by that. Rook b8, white to plain win. Your call. Knight h7. White rips open black's king. Karpov played rook e8 now, but let's have a look at this. King takes, queen h6. Check. This is why white played queen d2, among other things. King back, and now queen takes g6, and of course, the pleasant thing about such a constellation, open king, pawn f7 pinned, is that you always have perpetual check. But in this very case, white is winning. Queen g6 check. And then, this is also maybe a nice mechanism to remember. How does white win in this position? If you have perpetual checks, it's always nice to have. But of course you want to win, and white has a winner here. How does he achieve victory from him? Rook b8 was a mistake, and after knight h7, black cannot take on h7 because of queen h6 and etc. We had this. So Karpov played rook e8. Sometimes, it's possible to survive a streak like that. After all, black is fully developed. If he comes in to play knight to d4, stuff like that, but white hasn't castled stuff, maybe. But in this position, it doesn't work. Queen h6, Korchnoi's move, protecting this knight, threatening knight h5. Knight g5, Knight e5. Black tries to get counterplay in the center. Knight g5 threatening queen h7, checkmate takes. Queen takes g5, bishop takes g5. And this is quite a funny episode took place. Here Korchnoi actually stood up from his chair and went to the arbiter and asked him whether he was allowed to castle with his rook attacked. White obviously cannot take. This is something black is playing for. But white's rook in this position is attacked. The arbiter told him, yes, Mr. Korchnoi, he can castle. So he played castle short, bishop takes e4, f4, and here Karpov resigned. And also, afterwards, Korchnoi was asked, well, what would he have done if he wouldn't have been allowed to castle then? He said, okay, I would have just gone the other way, castled long, which is also winning for white, of course. A very important game in Korchnoi's career against his arch-rival Anatoly Karpov. Korchnoi versus Jan Timman, Dutch chess legend and one of my absolute heroes, I must say. Timman, great player. Position after black's move, rook a to c8. On the board, white in this position has the bishop pair, bishop a3, bishop e2 versus just one black bishop on a6, but black is fine. because black has no pawn weaknesses, has an intact structure. And, well, he also rook h8, planning to build up pressure against c4. Black can also play d5 at any moment he likes. And in all, I think that black has a decent position here, no more nor less. Korchnoi to play in this position. And Pierre Korchnoi tried to exploit the fact that black's bishop on a6 is an active piece, if you like, but it's also unprotected. So, how could white possibly exploit the fact that this bishop on a6 is unprotected? Find Viktor Korchnoi's move in this position, please. Korchnoi played bishop takes d6, which is a very risky move, and the idea, of course, after queen takes d6. Okay, question to you. What's white's idea in this position? Queen d6. Queen d6, white plays c5, regaining the bishop on a6. A good idea. So basically, pawn takes bishop a6, hitting the rook on c8, and if white were in time to capture on c5 now, with either pawn or knight, even better knight takes c5, he would have a lovely position. But the downside of it is that in this position after bishop takes d6, but queen d6, this queen on d6 is very actively placed. And black can exploit this queen's position by playing knight g4, no bishop on e2 anymore to control this square. It's on a6 now. Threatening to take on h2, g3 now, queen h6, again threatening to take on h2, h4, and now, knight takes d4, lovely text, back tactics, return tactics by black, knight d4, threatening both. Check on f3 and also queen takes a6. Korchnoi played e takes d4. What else is there to do? And now Timon went wrong. He should have played the simple queen takes a6. Say knight c5, queen d6, and in this position black is absolutely fine. Material is even, and black even has, maybe it's even easier to play for black because he has the idea to play e3, and white's king by these moves, g3 and h4, has become pretty weak. And yeah, I think the comp always says it's fine, it's equal, but in a practical position it's probably much easier to play for black here. So, queen takes a6 would have given black a more than decent position. Instead, Timon starts to play for complications, and this is one of the reasons why he's one of my heroes. He did not take on a6, but played e3 immediately, which will not work out fine for black, but it's a very, very interesting move. e3, and yeah, what do you think? How did Korchnoi reply to this move, e3? Your move. What would you do? e3, Korchnoi played bishop c8, and it looks very easy, of course. Takes. Now, how can this position not be won for white? He has two minor pieces on the rook for black's queen, and he's threatening to pick up the pawn on d2. And this is exactly, if he would achieve that, he would be simply winning. But black can play c4 now. And all of a sudden, this buddy threatens to get a new buddy on c3, c4, threatening the c4 3 with two protected passes. So it's very, very dangerous for white, and he has to find precise moves to keep his material and advantage. What's the first one? First precise move by white. What would he do with a knight on b3? After c4, white took on d2, allowing c3 with a double threat. C takes d2 and also c2, forking both roots. Now, what to do as white? Where to go with a knight d2? Knight f1, now c2, and now please show Korchnoi's winning point. After c2, Korchnoi played rook e1, exploiting black's back rank weakness. The rook cannot take. Checkmate. And also, after rook e1, we see why it was important for white to go with a knight to f1 to block the white's back ranking flag and not go to b3 to f3, because after let's say if he had gone here, for example knight f3, then after c2 rook e1, black can now both take on e1, or he can also take on b1. In both cases, the rook e1 is pinned, cannot move, cannot go to e8. So this wins for black. But after knight f1, this is not possible, and rook e1 now, Timon played king f8, and it's still pretty close, of course. What now? Black threats to take on e1, check, check. Again, double threat, c takes b, and c1, promoting the pawn. But now, Korchnoi plays rook e1 check, allowing him to block the diagonal with knight e3, and here Timon resigned, for example, king d8, knight e3. And white has consolidated, he will pick up a pawn on c2 and win the game. Yeah. Typical, I think, for both players this phase. Korchnoi was the first to take a risk with this capture, and after c5, Timon took the initiative, played this, and here, after pawn takes, he should not have played e3, but simply recaptured. He played e3 instead. This would have given him a fine position, but this e3 move is very attractive, but it fails, because, as we have seen, white can play this simple bishop takes c8, followed by how many power moves? 5 or 6, I don't know. We'll now continue with the discussion about the static strategy to play, boarding if you want to name it. In a way similar to the game against Petrosian, but at the same time we see a better, an even better connection between a concrete play and strategy. Or if you want to, tactics and strategy. This time the game was even more difficult for Korchnoi. She was playing against one of the greatest world champions ever, Karpov, and she was black. The moreover, she was trailing in the match by 3 points. There was not counting. Karpov was leading with 5-2. And this was the first of a series of 4 games during which Korchnoi managed to level the score. He used this time one of his favorite openings from the early phase of the match, the open Spanish. Earlier, he played bishop c5, but then the Karpov found a very strong novelty against Korchnoi's variation. So this time he helps for a not very popular line in those years, which later actually became popular, and Korchnoi himself played it many times. And Karpov chose the relatively neutral system. Knight f1 is held to be better. And now time has come to explain a bit the strategic plot of this structure. Black has a very strong blockading knight. This knight is important because the critical squared here is d4, and to some extent also c5. So white would like to set up a blockade on d4, put knight on d4, then take with a c-pawn. But then after this exchange, this knight would continue to exert pressure in the center, then later sustaining also c5. And this bishop also plays a part, because it pins and is ready to exchange this knight. Karpov's move was obviously aimed at putting pressure on the important knight on e6. Eventually exchange it, because the white's main idea is to increase his control on these squares and occupy the c5 square if possible. So Korchnoi played knight cd8. the reserve knight is hurrying to replace his colleague in case it gets exchanged. Bishop e3 and a5, not really giving white the time to consolidate on c5. And now Karpov made a move which makes impressive, knight bd2. Of course, that it's a good question why he doesn't play knight here. And, well, actually, this move is not really so dangerous. Knight d4. If queen d4, bishop takes f3 ruins the structure. And here takes. Anyway, now g6 an important move because black would like to play knight e6 without exposing the knight to the danger of being exchanged. Because he has these weaknesses along the c-file, so the knight is supposed to sustain c5 or at least put pressure on d4. Okay, if queen d5 now, then c6. That's not working. White can try to play bishop g4 and if h5, queen f6. But this is not really dangerous because the bishop has to go anyway, then c6. Well, knight e6 is coming. At some point, white will have to take on e7. Black doesn't have special properties because the weakness on c6 is compensated by the weakness on d4. We can also see that black, okay, this is not Korchnoi in the game. Black has displayed all his pawns on light squares, restricting the bishop, in a very similar way as Korchnoi did in the previous game. The difference here is that the position is more static. And besides, there is only a knight against bishop fight, so there are no additional dynamic elements. Or if bishop d3, then c6 prepares knight e6. Now the d4 pawn is in danger, so bishop f1. And now the simplest is to castle. Now black still has the threat queen b4 with the double attack. And if anything, he can also think of f5. And in principle, again, the bishop is not so active. So even though white has theoretically the better structure, the weakness on d4 and black's harmonious structure ensures some sort of equality. When playing knight bd2, Karpov wrote his thought that if you would be able to prove that black has only one good square for the knight e6, so that one of his knights would be superfluous. But we'll see that he was basically wrong. And now very mysterious move, c6. Here is the first moment when we can see the connection between concrete calculation and strategic thinking. Okay, black would castle, and he would have no real problems. But we'll see that he did better in keeping the rook on h8. And but since Korchnoi played knight g5 on the next move, there is one good question why not to do it now, because the idea is clear to clear the e6 square for the other knight. And the answer is that white can play g4. In principle, the most desirable move here would be g6. Okay, he cannot take on h3 because king h2 annoys a piece. If the bishop goes back, then okay, white clears the path for his f pawn. So the critical move is g6. And now comes a fantastic move. Okay, if gh, gf, the g file opens, black already has attacking chances. But or if bishop retreats to d3, then knight h3 and bishop g4 wins 2 pawns. But there comes this fantastic move, bishop d7. Okay, black has to keep his knight on g5 defended. And now takes a knight e4, followed by queen d5, with a practically decisive attack for white. Okay, he's not really a piece down because the bishop on h5 is trapped. So we understand now that c6 prepares this operation by defending the d5 pawn. We'll never know how much Korchnoi did see of this variation. But even if he didn't cooperate it, his feel was right. It was clear that he understood that it's better to have the structured combat. It could be simply a move you play. Okay, just let's defend all the pawns. It's and okay. It's also some sort of inviting whites to make a move. We'll never know, but the move in the game, the move really made sense. And Karpov now played b4. This is not really a blocking move because white doesn't have resources to keep a knight on d4 or on c5. But probably he was afraid that very soon Korchnoi would undermine his structure in this way. And it's also a good question how to proceed, because he doesn't want to go knight f1. This would again awaken the defense of his knight on f3. Anyway, after b4, knight g5 was completely playable. And this is what Korchnoi did, and now we see that actually there is no such thing as a superfluous knight. No, both black's knights are well placed. After 96. Now, of course, if g4, then g6. Bishop c2, knight h3. So queen e2. Actually, h4 deserves some investigation. Because what is that here? First of all, okay, if queen h4, then e6 is quite dangerous. And if knight e6, then g3. And now the bishop has heritage to a good diagonal. The only diagonal which is not controlled by the black pawns, and a square from which it keeps the blocking knight under pressure, which is a bit annoying. There's also a good question where to go with the king. I would probably prefer b7, but okay, maybe cancelling is also okay. But in principle, white has chances to retain some small plus. Okay, he would then increase his control on d4, maybe at some point take on e6 and keep the brocade. Okay. But in any case, after h4 there is a better move. And this is g6. Black attacks the bishop before it can retreat to h3. And of course, if the bishop retreats to c2, then he can simply take the pawn, because e6 is not a threat anymore. And if so, then black will continue with h6, knight e6, h6, and suddenly white's king side would be in danger. So queen e2, g6 anyway. You can see that, okay, this g6 move, I didn't invent it myself. It was something that Korchnoi actually played. Tapel doesn't like the idea of having his bishop restricted by the enemy pawn, so he went bishop g4. She wanted to keep knights in order to have some chance to fight for the brocade, but okay, Korchnoi first reaches the best regrouping. And now h5. This is the moment when after very laborious maneuvering with some concrete details, which we have seen, she suddenly threatens to start an attack along the h file. Of course, Karpov exchanged queens, but okay, now just to say that if the 4 and the 5, the knight g7, and white cannot keep his king side intact, he will have only weaknesses. So he took and rook h4, and this demands quite difficult position for white. First of all, there is this h file. Somehow white cannot do anything to neutralize the pressure. And secondly, there is this permanent threat of d4, which, if carried out under optimal circumstances, would leave white's queen side weak. So now there comes the new maneuvering phase. Now knight e6. The set is rook c4 followed by d4 already, so knight is 3 as quick as possible, rook d8. Now game d4 is kind of settling. And knight g4, because if black now plays d4, his rook on h4 will be out of play. Knight g5, I assume that Korchnoi intended to play knight e4 because this knight is hanging. And then knight g3, knight f5 to increase the control over d4. Karpov reacted well with knight e3, then knight e6 back, again d4 is a threat. And then he changed the route, knight g7. So now again knight f5, knight f5 is the idea. Okay, Karpov does not have much to do, so knight e3 was normal. And now knight f5. Nevertheless. So it is the moment when Karpov somehow simplified his opponent's task, because he went knight c2. Knight f5 would not be a solution, because now black has this player of king e6, rook c4, and then break with d4. If rook here, then f4. But if g3, then yes, that is okay. King e6 would come anyway. Then rook dh8. Somehow, the p5 pawn is weak, and the white king is some danger. Okay, if g3, then this is simply dangerous. This takes, and this should win. Rook e2 next, and then rook takes a2. In principle, the only move allowing to stay in the game was knight g4. But okay, black still is very stable. And Hikaru group with rook h8, maybe rook d7, rook h d8, the right on f5 is stable. And at some point d4, and then all these pawns would be weak. The white king would be also a bit far from the main theater of events. Knight c2 was probably a desperate attempt to play knight d4, which would actually kind of solve white's problems. But he was not given that chance, even though in a time trouble Korchnoi plays very well. Rook c4. And now, of course, not knight g7, because then we would return to the previous scenario. But d4 at once, which only looks like a pawn sacrifice, because now black has knight e6. And Korchnoi edited his pawn. And this position already will be won for black. It's a very bad ending for white. The game was around, and Korchnoi won without special problems. It's obvious that black's pawns are much better than white's, and also his pieces are more active. But okay, it is already an endgame phase. It's not our main subject anymore. So we saw in this game a very concrete strategy. In the game against Petrosian, it was more global. It was about keeping the control. Okay, here Korchnoi was playing with black. And the main prod gravitated around these squares, the proking knight on e6, the d4 and c5 squares. And we saw how he managed to get the control in this matter. And also some small concrete details which actually are of decisive importance. Had he hurried with knight g5, then the game would have been immediately over after g4. So, I mean, the match. So, yes, I would call this a bit more of a creative strategy, a little bit more than the game with Petrosian. Even though the game seemed to be very slow here too. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe.